I hope everyone had a restful break and a bite to eat, and are ready to eat some more with the presenters for this afternoon's part of the program. I'd like to ask all of you to consider filling out the survey that is in the back of your program. The Wyoming Council for the Humanities, or Humanities Council, which is a primary funder of this symposium, and we would like them to continue that funding, and they would like us to provide some feedback. So you could do something beneficial for this symposium in the future if you would provide that. The first part of the program this afternoon consists of reflections by me, which I thought of Stuart Smalley on Saturday Night Live. I don't know. Some of you get the reference, but I thought I would reflect on what is inspiration. What inspires you? What inspires you about Yellowstone? I didn't really fully understand the impact of the specialness of Yellowstone Park through the iconic landforms of the lower falls or Yellowstone Lake or Old Faithful or any of those sorts of things. It descended upon me in the late 1990s. This museum had produced a traveling exhibition on bison that was installed at Lake Lodge. And so on a crisp October afternoon, mid-October, I made my way into the park to see if everything was still working and to see how people were responding to our presentation. And as I turn north off from Fishing Bridge, I'm paralleling the river there, and I looked over to my right, and there were at least 100 or more bison that were preparing to cross the river. And I put on my brakes, and there was not a soul in the park. It was a beautiful day, and I watched this group of bison form up. They took the water with a big bull in the lead. The older animals were sort of hipping the younger ones into the water, and here they came. And they emerged right in front of my vehicle. Didn't pay me any mind. They trotted across the road. There was a wallow on the other side of the road. They commenced to do what buffalo do. They wallowed. I, meantime, looked around for someone to share this experience with. And there wasn't a soul there. But it was really the inspirational moment for me because I thought of Charlie Russell. And I thought of his painting, When the Land Belonged to God. And I thought of that big bull bison coming up out of the Missouri River with the water coming off his beard, and I'd seen that very thing. And I knew that Russell had got it right. Just as we know that the artists that we've seen today got it right. Somehow they managed to capture, if not the form, the exact form, the detail of Yellowstone every time they captured its spirit. They captured something that was very elemental. And other things that have occurred to me today are the interplay between planning and serendipity. You plan, the plans are dictated by others, the government, the sort of mechanical process you have to go through to create a wet collodion plate, all of the planning, but it's really being ready for the moment. And I think that's part of inspiration. I was really interested in the place that fire has played, not just potentially in the park, but burning up of the archives of the at least two great archival collections, and how fragile history is, or the stuff of history, as well as how fragile nature is. And I was also reminded of the time which I think that I have the honor of commissioning the largest painting of Yellowstone that was ever produced in Wilson Hurley's Lower Falls of Yellowstone, 16 feet by 40 feet. Those of you who have been to the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum have seen that magnificent work, one of 5 iconic Western landscapes. When I approached Wilson to do the project, he had no boundaries. He could choose whatever he wanted to choose. And the Lower Falls was one of his choices. All he said was, "I've waited my whole life for a room." He immediately departed for Italy to see how the Italians had handled it, and he concluded that they hadn't done a very good job. Their rooms didn't work too well because your eye didn't have time to fill in the gaps. So he concluded that he would do a triptych format that would perhaps help the viewer. And then he did this magnificent painting of Yellowstone. It's just a beautiful rendition of the Lower Falls. And yet he put a bit of whimsy in it. He and his wife Roz appear in the image. They are located on a ledge up above the falls on the, as you look at the painting on the left-hand side. They're so small that at 50 feet away you can't see them, but they're giving their little waves to everybody who looks. Also, the art critic from the Albuquerque newspaper is also in the painting. He is lurking behind a tree. Also making a judgment on Wilson's work. I think it passes muster and is in the great tradition of landscape art that we celebrate here today. But enough about me. I want to introduce our next presenters, father and son team, Mike and Michael Poulsen. Over the past decade, I doubt that there are many Americans anywhere who have trekked through the backcountry of Yellowstone and to more remote locations than these two, and a dedicated group of colleagues who have been involved in a very interesting project. This is an eclectic team that involves artists, scientists, and historians who have taken it upon themselves to scour the remote reaches of Yellowstone Park in search of waterfalls. And in the process, they have documented more than 300 waterfalls so far. And this does not even count the ones that have made the park iconic. In fact, these artists probably never saw, or assuredly never saw most of these, if any. Mike Poulsen is a native of this region and a graduate of Cody High School. He served in the Marine Corps and attended Powell Community College and Arizona State University, where he studied art. He's no stranger to this assembly and to people here in Cody. He became a professional artist in 1973. He's learned from some of the very best in the field. He's taken workshops from people like Howard Terpening and Jim Wilcox, people that you know, and he's imparted his love of the outdoors, his love of art to his son Michael. When I saw Michael earlier yesterday, I said, "You're a lot taller than you were the last time I saw you." And last evening, I had the privilege of going over to Mike's house, where the essence of the project that he's going to talk about today was obvious in the concrete reality of the imagery that occupied walls all over his beautiful home, walls filled with waterfalls. And it was such a thrilling, really, to see someone who has invested so much of his time and energy in making it possible for you to feel inspired by things that you haven't seen, things that are on the one hand wonderful and objects of wonder, on the other hand are terribly fragile, and a reminder of what we must do to preserve and conserve these resources. I'm going to let Mike and Michael come up and give us the nuts and bolts of Backcountry Waterfalls of Yellowstone and that project. Mike?
Thank you, Byron. I tell you what, that we sure miss you here in Cody. There's a couple questions that we've been asked when we've been camped out around the park. And probably one of the most endearing was, at what time are the waterfalls turned off? And you know, they asked the wrong person. As I said, is Dan Wink here? Good. Okay. I said, ask Dan Wink. He's in control of the water park. Well, anyway, one other thing I wanted to point out was we had an Asian fella. Oh, there, let me. We had an Asian fella walk into our camp. And he's bringing this big chunk of log. I know. I brought my log pillow with me, my nappy. So, okay. And he walks in and he says, "Got a light?" And so we look at each other and I said, "Michael, get that propane bottle over there and start it on fire for him and see if he can handle it."
It was his first time camping. He didn't know how to light it on fire.
He actually had a hibachi in the back of his hatchback, a rental car, and they were grilling their dinner on it. Any of you ever observe a hibachi? They have holes in the bottom. And I told Michael, I said, well, if there's a fire in the middle of the night, just whip out that fire extinguisher and we'll put her out. But it has afforded us to do some really fantastic things with the park and meet some wonderful people. I do have some comments I'd like to make. before Michael steps in and takes all the time. He really got a handle on how to take care of his dad, except for packing things in. I still haven't been able to get rid of a pack while I'm walking, and I'm going to rename this project Bushwhackers of Yellowstone, because there are no paths where we are. So we're trying to be careful about making much of an imprint in Yellowstone, and making sure that everyone goes in 2x2, and yet we carry bear spray, but yet in the backcountry we have yet to see a single bear. Mike Stevens, in 20 plus years, has never carried bear spray or a handgun, and he's never had any encounter. He says, well, they're where all the food is. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and run off on this.
We'll play a little teaser clip that was developed by Mike Goldoni that's here with us today. There's going to be a documentary covering the project. So we'll let you watch that first, and then I'll turn the time over to Mike Sr. It's kind of funny, we've had 4 Mikes on the team going back with us, so it's been kind of a source of comedy. You know, when you yell out, "Mike, I need a hand," you kind of hear an echo. And but it's a great crew. Michael did a fabulous job, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with them at PBS. I'll turn that over. I'll give it to you, and I'll take some time at the end and wrap it up.
I have been doing this ever since I was little. It's something I think that's a part of you from a very early age. And I've never thought about ever doing anything else. Never wanted to be a fireman or a policeman or anything else. I just wanted to be an artist. I fell in love with water when I was a kid, when my parents took us to Niagara Falls, going onto the boat and the boat ride around the falls, and it was the roar and the thunder of the water and the colors that permeated through the sun. It was almost like a lens, a prism, where you'd see all these colors. And that stuck with me. It takes a lot of people to make something happen. And to be able to paint these and to do it right, you've got to get to the waterfalls with the right group. And my son is the project director. And this year we have Minnie Martin helping as an intern, and she's been a great help. And Mike Aldoni has also joined us in the backcountry. And I think they're all starting to see this come together as a bona fide project that has a lot of educational aspect. Stories about the Indians' involvement in Yellowstone, the early mountain men, and the history of the park. Would I call it my grand opus? Absolutely. It's a culmination of almost 45 years. And this is something that I can put everything I've learned into this project. It's also my legacy. It just enables me to do my best work at this time of my life. As well. I figure in another 10 years I might like to sit back and maybe keep some of my paintings for a change. So, with that in mind, I just feel like I'm at the right place at the right time, doing what I need to be doing, and just living a dream. Well, you could say that I was at the right place at the right time, of course, but it was the path, how to get there was the big part of it. And so the stars, as they aligned in perfect order, I find myself at the museum, and I was listening to a presentation on the Waterfall book, and I believe Lee Whittlesey, is he here today? He was giving a presentation on the Waterfall book. Can everyone hear me okay? Oh, okay. Okay. I stopped into here and I was listening to the presentation and picked up one of the books, but from the probably from the moment that they began showing some of the waterfalls on the screen, I guess you might want to call it an epiphany, or I found myself completely enthralled on this idea that these three guys took the time and have literally walked thousands of miles in Yellowstone and covered so much territory. And I was talking to Mike Stevens on the right, who is our guide. I was bound and determined to somehow put this together and paint some waterfalls that Moran hadn't painted. That was a big trip for me. But again, too, I wanted to do something that I think Byron Price and I talked about again last night a little bit. When Byron was here as the interim director, he posed a question to me about what specifically has been done in the last 200 or 300 years in regards to painting. And boy, that was a strong metaphor for me for what I was doing in my life at that time. And I continued to assess what I was doing and trying to look at my work as a whole, and what benefit was my work. So probably with a little childlike excitement when I made my discovery, so to speak, I thought it was an aha movement, a moment that I saw that this is what I was here to do. I wanted to add a timeless element of fine art rooted in the birth history of the park, and to tell a comprehensive story and the interplay of the people that inhabited this great country. Just as a note on some of the things that hadn't been covered today, actually some of my notes will be overlapping a lot of the talks that were here earlier in the day. The stories, and I have been doing research material for quite some time, quite a few years actually. Peter Hasrick's books have helped, Dr. McCracken's books, anything I could get my hands on to know something about the park and how I could make this project work. Harry Younts, a lot of people probably don't know, he was a mountain man, and he was the first ranger in the park. Lieutenant Kennedy, who rounded up the sheep-eater Indians, was actually saved by the very people he was supposed to take to a reservation. The Indians also would return to Yellowstone each summer, where the Park Service would put them to work as guides. And that made sense. They knew the country better than anybody else. The introduction of wolves to Yellowstone has had a huge impact on Yellowstone and its and the other animals that inhabit Yellowstone. But I'd like to talk a little bit about Mike Stevens, Paul Rubenstein, Lee Whittlesey, who have discovered and documented more waterfalls than anyone in the history of North America, and over 300 waterfalls and counting. So what defines a discoverer? These men personify explorers and discoverers in our time, which is defined as not just one who finds, but documents and disseminates the information. Beginning as early as late 1970s, Yellowstone National Park archivist and historian Lee Whittlesey was already underway on a project to document the history of all the known waterfalls in Yellowstone, about 50 at that time. In the 1980s, park employee Mike Stevens, retired math teacher, began an independent mission to photograph all of these waterfalls. Then in the 1990s, when Rubenstein came aboard, the three began a new quest to survey as many of the previously unexplored rivers and creeks and falls in the park's remotest backcountry as possible. They had no idea that their years of exploring the Yellowstone wilderness would yield so much new information. Their 7 years of research, well, actually, it was more than that. It was probably more like 15 to 20 years here, and thousands of miles of off-trail exploration had provided the most new large features, falls, and geographical information to the contiguous United States map in the last half century. So there are things out there that we still haven't got a grasp on. It's nice to know that there are still new discoveries. Thomas Moran's vision of the Western landscape, was critical to the creation of Yellowstone National Park, as we know. The previous talks really comprehensively covered that, and I'm going to skip down a little bit. Talk about the Moran as he joined the survey during the 40 days in the wilderness area. He visually documented over 30 different sites and produced a diary of the expedition's progress and daily activities. What an inspiration he has been for, I think just about every artist I've ever known. Moran comes up in a conversation somewhere. They revealed the scale and splendor of the beautiful Yellowstone region more than written or oral descriptions at that time, persuading, of course, President Grant and U.S. Congress and Yellowstone to be preserved. These works were instrumental in convincing the United States Congress to pass the Yellowstone Park Bill in 1872. Our paintings, our songs, our stories, they're maps essentially for where we went and where we've been. Behind us, as we trail towards new modalities of thought and discovery, the art is the evidence. Thank you. And the art is what we brought back, what we transmuted from the other dimension to share with everyone else, to share with ourselves, more importantly. Coulter's hell was nothing but myth and colorful exaggerations before the paintings and photos were confirmed and Coulter's visual depictions realized. Ellen de Botton wrote, "A dominant impulse on encountering beauty is to wish to hold onto it, to possess it, and give it weight in one's life. With art, photography, and film, we defy impermanence and add value to our life experience, both individually and collectively. Through these mediums of artistic expression, we refuse to accept the ephemeral nature of that moment." Faulkner used to talk about the writer's futile but noble efforts to fit the world inside of a sentence, to capture the universe inside of a page. We as artists do the same. As a picture is worth 1,000 words, as Dylan Thomas wrote, we rage against the dying of the light. Art is an adventure, and we pay money for those pieces of expression that take us to places we cannot go by ourselves. these explorers, these artists, and many others are heroes, cultural luminaries. They are madmen who have somehow been able to coax and domesticate their madness towards useful ends. I was about ready to insert my name in that because I tend to think sometimes in the backcountry, what the hell am I doing here? It is difficult. The terrain is tough. Places you could never get a horse, and even in some animals, in some instances, there is nothing but timber, and you can understand why the let it burn policy has been effective to some extent, where it allows for animals to have more areas to graze and to be alone with nature and to be able to protect their territory. I've thought about this a lot. I would have loved to have been back in Washington, D.C. When Moran and Jackson presented their pieces before Congress and the public. Too bad they didn't have PBS, Mike? What that might have been like to see their reactions to tangible evidence of places only imagined in wild stories and rumors, now documented on canvas and celluloid. I imagine for myself it was like the first time I looked through a telescope, excuse me, that was a big dinner, and I was sitting in a planetarium for the first time as a child, and looking at the cosmos. A quick note, when I remember the first time I was growing up in Akron, Ohio, I was in a planetarium and lights went down low, the stars came out, and I could see the cosmos. And I said, you know, I have never seen this in Akron. Of course, it's the rubber capital of the world. You know, you have silt on your everything, soot, time you get up, time you go to bed. So I thought the stars, and then we got the ranch in Wyoming, and then I actually saw what a Wyoming starry night was. You know, filming the Waterfall series with Wyoming PBS has been a special experience for us. Being able to collaborate creatively to educate and, God willing, inspire future generations to continue to explore in whatever field or career they may find themselves. And I have the greatest pleasure of working with my son. And I have to express that Aristotle expressed the notion that human beings don't care about spectacle, but rather we care more for aesthetic understanding or heightened comprehension. And in other words, cognitive ecstasy, which is defined as an exhilarating neurostorm of intense intellectual pleasure. Consciousness is obsessed with pattern is structure, and when we find patterns and connect the dots, we experience this cognitive experience and the exhilaration that comes from it. When we see children, they are learning machines all the time, creating new synaptic connections, constantly experiencing this cognitive ecstasy, this curiosity, and this insatiable drive to discover. It is feral in nature with children, and this should be fostered and nurtured as best we can. So, in that desire, we have established a partnership with the Yellowstone Park Foundation and Wyoming PBS, which are accepting donations for the project in conjunction with a percentage of each painting sale going to the Yellowstone Children's Education Fund. It is as essential as it is rewarding to encourage a culture of creative learning, exploring, and understanding. We've got to expose these future generations to art. The Waterfall series will be a part of Yellowstone Centennial Celebration, as well as a traveling exhibition centered around education, discovery, and social responsibility. We are stewards of these natural wonders, and to love them, you must experience them. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Oh, that's fantastic. It's been a real pleasure and joy to be able to work with my father, who definitely inspires me on many levels. He's taught me a lot, and it's definitely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be here and involved in this project, and especially to go play outside. It's fun. I kind of associate it with, he's more the Moran and I'm more the Jackson. I take the photos and he gets to paint them. So it's truly a very unique aspect when you incorporate that historical with Moran and Bierstadt and the creation of the park. It has posed some definite issues, especially with regard to getting back into these places, getting the appropriate permature to be able to get the content that we need. And it's kind of a funny story. We were really looking forward to using drones to get a lot of our content, mainly because it would be really easy as well. It would lighten our footprint in the backcountry. And it was funny, when we were talking with Dan Wink and Karen Kress, Dan, who's the superintendent of the park, having this very conversation, he gets a call. And lo and behold, it was the very time when someone had crashed a drone into Grand Prismatic Springs. So it's we've really had to get creative in getting the camera angles, the shots. And Michael Toney can attest to this. He's been very creative. He's a professional in his field. He does very well. But I thought that was funny. Because the whole desire is to keep and preserve these places. That's a huge aspect of this. It's fun to go back into the backcountry, but it's also one thing to be stewards of these areas and hold value in keeping them well preserved. This will, of course, for me, when he's busy painting, I will often go on hikes and excursions with Mike Stevens, and which are really a treat. He's been a guide in Yellowstone for over 30 years, and so he has a wealth of knowledge, and I've learned a tremendous amount. Everything from all of the plant and flora and fauna that I had forgot from Boy Scouts. He helped bring me back up to speed, and it's been just a great. Well, as my dad talked about, that cognitive ecstasy, I guess you could say, is constant learning. And I really have to give a huge vote of gratitude to museums who are really a hub for this learning experience for children and adults and everyone. And we think of history, even in the aspect of the Native American story. If we do not learn of our history, we're more apt to repeat it. But even on the side, I think about Carl Sagan. Despite our failings and our fallibilities and limitations, we humans are capable of greatness. And it's very true. I think seeing this art, absorbing the information, the trials that the people had to go through to get there, to accomplish their life's work is tremendous, and it's inspiring. And so adding to that, it's really a joy. And special thanks to Karen for putting this together. This is absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for your time. Looking forward to the questions at the end after Karen's finished. Thank you very much. Enjoy being here.